Today, I'd like it to be kind of interactive at the end with the Q&A, and I think we're all in a kind of niche space here. And I just want to insist on the fact that I don't think that you'll get another chance to have so many people involved in the independent press in one room ever again. I mean, the chances of that happening are really quite rare. So I encourage you to take advantage of that in the Q&A, and also sort of just like mingling around over lunch as well. So let me just quickly give you an idea of how this is going to play out. We have 4 panelists, each involved in independent press. The title of our panel is "The Challenges and the Triumphs of Independent Publishing." Sadly, the challenges outweigh the triumphs, I think, but I'd like each of you to conclude with a triumph that you hold dear. Each of the presenters, each of our speakers have more or less 15 minutes to present a little bit what they do, just kind of very generally, and then I will intervene with a couple of questions around the challenges and also ending with the triumphs, and then I'd like to open it up to questions from you. Instead of introducing them in this sort of just reading the bio off the PDF that was sent to me, what I'd like to do is kind of with each one of them introduce them with a key word that came up in our discussions yesterday, which was a kind of closed session, which is quite an exclusive word, but it was a sort of kind of industry, it was kind of a problem-solving session, really, more than anything else. It seemed to be pushed towards finding resolutions to common obstacles. So I'd like to introduce each of these people with a key word that stuck with me, and that will probably kind of thread through a little bit of what they say. So we'll start with Bibi. Okay, Bibi, Bakare-Yusuf is a co-founder of Cassava Republic Press, based in Nigeria. And the key word that I've retained from yesterday with Bibi is chaos. And it's not necessarily because Bibi is chaotic, but it's because these 4 people come from different geographical areas, and in each of sometimes this idea of delocalization or moving their centers of production or distribution away from sort of kind of where they are is part of the model that they're working with. And Bibi spoke of chaos in comparing the Nigerian model, which is somehow fluid, even though things don't always work, with a UK model, which is where she kind of went and tried to do things, which was stiff, and ultimately she wondered, where are these readers in the end? So if you could just present, I mean, don't talk about chaos necessarily, but tell us a little bit about Cassava Republic Press, how it started, everything that you told us yesterday, in fact.
Good morning, or good afternoon now. Thank you. I'm an accidental publisher, and 15 years later, I'm still a publisher, because I started out life as a scholar, and moving to Nigeria, I looked around me and visiting people's homes, and I saw books that I felt were not particularly elevating, and they were not books that would advance civilization, and they're certainly not going to get Nigerians out of the mess and chaos that we're in. And so I asked a few friends who are more business-minded to consider setting up a publishing company, and they felt that the only way you can have a publishing company that's viable is to do educational textbooks, which is true. And I thought, well, that's not really what I'm interested in. I'm interested in fiction, storytelling, creative nonfiction in particular. And so I went online. I thought, it can't be that difficult to set up a publishing company. So I started, and a friend said to me, you've got to do a business plan, and that means putting together Excel spreadsheets and stuff. And of course, the calculations just were wrong. He kept saying red for 5 years. There was no profit. It was just going to be red. And so I thought, let's put that aside. Let's just start. And I started by acquiring an author, and then deciding in a population of 180 million, 50 million to 180 million, it can't be so difficult to sell 10,000 copies. So I went ahead and printed 10,000 copies. So 2 books, 10,000 times 2, 20,000. bad idea. Not only did I went ahead and printed 20,000 copies, 2 books, 10,000 each. They were a disaster. The printing was bad, upside down. It was a mess. And I remember when I went to we had brought the author from England to Nigeria to do an author's tour of like 6 states in the country. I went to collect the book from the printers, and I busted out crying, like, this is not what I wanted, we can't do anything with it. And on the day when the author arrived, she was comforting me. She said, it's okay. I'm like, what do you mean it's okay? This is a mess. No one's going to buy this. Anyway, so my partner and I at the time, I said to him, look, we can't continue with this. No one's going to buy this book. We can't even give them away. People were rejecting them, just even as donation. That's how bad they were. So destroy. And then I thought, okay, let's go to India on holiday. And a couple of friends were going to India. They were staying in this really super, uber luxury hotel in India. We didn't have any money. We thought, okay, the last penny, we'll go and stay in the hotel with them and calm down after. And then once we finished the holiday, we just went around printers in India to look for printers, and we'll start all over again. And so we did. We went back to Nigeria, started acquiring authors' books, and really paying very small advances to authors, but with the idea that we're going to develop a market, and the way in which we're going to do so is to publish really high literary fiction, but don't market them as such. Don't put a demarcation between highbrow, lowbrow, but we're going to give them really good text and position them in spaces where you may not necessarily find those kinds of books, like hairdressers, supermarkets. The bookshops were negligent. We didn't really have a lot of bookshops in Nigeria. We have them, but they're a handful. So we started doing that. Again, even though I had printed 10,000 copies and I'd learned my lesson, I still felt it was because the printing was bad. So the next print run was 5,000. You have to remember that I'm Nigerian and we think we're quite excessive. And I think I do, on a serious note, I think civilization is built on 2 things, excess and violence. And whether you're a publisher or a writer, there's a certain kind of self-mutilation that you go through. Sleepless, when you're creating any kind of birthing anything, it requires a lot of pain and agony. But also it requires a certain excess of the imagination. You have to be excessive. You have to think bigger and outside of yourself. If you think of the people that build such things like the pyramid, it requires you to think beyond yourself. And so I thought, 5,000 copies is not such a bad thing. And we printed 5,000 copies. This time, I thought to myself, I'm going to create a business that people are just going to have an emotional connection with. They're going to think, I want this book. This story is something I want it the way I want food. And so our stripe line is called Feeding the African Imagination. So we printed 5,000 copies, and within the year, we sold the 5,000 copies. And that gave us more confidence to do more. And nearly 15 years later, we're still going strong, and we're still publishing books that ordinarily Western publishers may or may not publish. Because I'm very clear that I want books that will be read now. It might be read by a few people, even if those people are 5,000 people, but importantly, that I want the books to go into the future, into the archive. Because I'm really interested in the archive and how we build an archive I don't want the archive of the African archive to be dictated or be produced only by the West. Because we know as publishers, we have such power to editorialize through our editorial decision, through the packaging, through the visual identity we confer onto a book. We can decide how that book travels into the future and the ways in which it gets consumed, and the fact that the content of the text itself can help to shape how society come to see themselves. And I really felt that for Africans, where people have this myth that if you want to hide anything from an African, just store it inside a book because they won't read it. And I take it very seriously, and I think it's such a dangerous. We can laugh about it, but it's dangerous, especially for countries that have experienced colonialism and the violence of colonialism, where our history we've been told that we have no history. And if we've been told that we have no history, we cannot also rely on the very people who said we have no history to continue to shape that history and the narrative. And so we have to own the means of production. And that's the kind of genesis behind Cassava Republic Press. So we publish between 10 books a year, fiction, non-fiction, children's books. And some of the books we publish, we have a lot of anxiety around, especially the non-fiction. Certainly there's a particular book that we really deliberated about when we're publishing that particular book. Would this be the end of our business? So when we have such books, we know it's dangerous to publish them, but we're still going to do so. But what we do differently is to do scenario planning of what kinds of things will happen if we go ahead and publish, and then plan for those 4 different things that might possibly happen. And then 4 years ago, we set up a branch in the UK, because when you're in Africa or in other parts of the world, you always think the grass is greener. You always look at the West and think, oh gosh, they're doing all this amazing stuff. They've got the structure, they've got distribution, everything is all worked out. It's a lie.
True.
So you always think that, and I really thought if we went to the UK, we can reach a bigger market, we can reach other markets that it's difficult to reach from Nigeria. But even as I went to the UK, I was very clear that the first market has to be African market. First and foremost, that we need to develop that ecosystem first to create an appetite and a taste for the kinds of books we want to publish. And then we arrived in the UK, realized that the empire is still the empire. The publishing industry is still very white. It's still very Oxbridge. The same types of people are still dominating, but it's okay. We're just going to shake the cookie jar for a moment. And I think we've done that because it has led to quite a number of publishing houses in the UK to running helter-skelter to looking for African writers to publish, which is great. That's one. And 2, what I discovered is that the 400 years legacy or more that the UK or the US or European publishing has, it is not necessarily the best thing for the 21st century of going into the future. That, in fact, the fluid, as you said, the fluid, chaotic nature that we have in the third so-called southward, the south
hemisphere,
the southern hemisphere, is probably what we're going to need for the future. And that means that where you may not necessarily have big distribution houses that are distributing your books for you, you may not have the review spaces in newspapers that Western publishers tend to rely on, and even in the West is shrinking by the day, and so you have to think very differently. And also, we've discovered that you have all these distribution networks, you have all these bookshops, And yet we're selling not anymore. In fact, selling less than we do in Nigeria alone. And Nigeria is not supposed to be reading, but in the UK we have, it's a challenge. So I think I'm interested in how do we marry the chaotic, fluid, energetic, openness of a space like Nigeria with the more formal, more rigid structure you have. It's how do we bring the two together in conversation? It's what I'm interested in. I'm also, importantly, interested in a conversation, a South conversation, this kind of conversation, because I think there's a lot we can learn from each other, and already yesterday it's been really invigorating for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Bibi. Can I just ask one quick question? The book that you considered would be too dangerous for the business, why? What was the danger?
They won't sell.
No, it wasn't.
They won't sell enough?
No, government.
Oh, okay, so it was a censorship sort of issue. Okay, which we'll get to in the challenges. Thank you very much. So next speaking, so two of our presenters have actual presentations. The others are just fueled by their charisma, and we'll speak driven by that. Samar Haddad runs the Atlas for Publishing and Distribution, and she's also a founder of the International Alliance of Independent Publishers, which is, again, in the spirit of collaboration, is a very interesting sort of body that I'd like to come back to. And the key word that I've chosen to introduce Samar is biblidiversity. So there's a clue in that, and she will develop that, I'm sure, at great length and with great verve.
Okay, hello everyone, and thanks for the organizers again, and for the warehouse, of course. Okay, I had prepared a beautiful presentation for you, but my computer died on me yesterday, so I'm so sorry. So we'll go the old school, so you will hear a story. Okay, so my name is Samar Haddad, as Kevin said. I'm the daughter of the founder of Atlas Bookstores, one of the first bookstores in the city of Damascus. It was in mid-50s. And this bookstore used to be like a point of gathering for all the intellectuals who visited Syria, even the university professors, intellectual people from town and from outside town, from outside the country. They used to give like appointments to each other. Okay, let's meet at Atlas Library at the bookstore. And my father was there running the business, and it was like one of the first, as I said, and they were like very little, 3 or 4 at that time. And the bookstore like quickly took its place among the cultural milieu in Damascus, and it was very successful. And I still meet people everywhere around the world who are telling me, oh, yeah, we used to go to that bookstore, and we used to have like the upper floor was for children books. And literally we grew up, me, my brother and my sister, we grew up at this floor because my mother, well, I'll take them with you, and we go there, we read books with each other. And this is how I remember my bringing up at this, my relation with this place. And I think in the year, in the 90s, beginning of the 90s, I decided to immigrate to Canada all of a sudden because I felt outcasted in this Syrian society somehow. And I decided that that's it. I'm not going to come back to the Middle East. I'm like staying there. In the year 1990, I think, the phone rang. My brother is telling me that they have problems in Damascus and they need help. Okay, so I had to decide to come back. It was like, they had difficulties on many levels, health issues. The bookstore wasn't doing that great at that time because my father got old and the employee who was with him again got old. So it was like a lifetime decision. what do I do? So I decided, okay, I will go back, check on the situation, see if I can help, and come back. And I'm still here since. I couldn't go back to Canada. And I don't regret it. Please don't misunderstand me, because this experience empowered me, enriched me, and gave me lots of insight about what's happening in the field of publishing. So we at Atlas, we like to publish. Like I said yesterday, we cater for good readers. We don't cater for the market. We always try to find the happy medium between them, which is becoming more and more difficult, rather impossible, but we are still consistent on this mission. And I see the book as, like for more than half a millennium, it has been the tool and method of sharing information and knowledge, and I believe that it will continue to be. This is how I look at the book. And as you need to diet to shape your body, you need to read to shape your mind. This is my motto in my publishing house. Otherwise, I would have closed down a long time ago. And because of the unrest in Syria for the last 10 years, we had to expand to Lebanon. I licensed in Lebanon for many reasons. First one, the censorship, to detour the censorship, the severe censorship in Syria. So books we cannot print in Syria, we take to Lebanon. And the other reason is it's easier to move books from Lebanon to book fairs, outside book fairs. Now it's better, but during the last 10 years it was very difficult for us to ship books to book fairs from Syria. And I mean, it's very expensive to ship from Syria through Lebanon. So I had to license in Beirut and rent a depot where I have my major quantity of books there. And so we move books to book fairs from Damascus and Beirut to all book fairs. We go to book fairs, mostly all the Arab book fairs, but we don't go directly. I mean, the books are there, but we don't go. I don't go because there's no we. The team shrank after 10 years. I mean, we were 7, now we are me and one part-timer. This is all. But we still have like freelancers network we work with. They are great. They are like scattered everywhere in the world. Translators, designers, and layout, proofreaders, you name it. I always try to deal with people who are still living inside Syria, because I think it's a statement of them that they refuse to leave the country and they are jobless. So I try always my priority is to deal with these people who are inside. If we cannot, deal with them, okay, we look elsewhere, but mainly we are focusing on the people inside the country. And because we are, mostly we are like a Syrian publisher, and we address the Syrian readers and the Syrian people in general. So that's why we focus on Syria a lot. We publish, I consider myself a generalist publisher. We don't boycott any genres. We don't do children books, for example, academic and specialized books, no. But anything else, we don't have any issue with it, fiction, non-fiction. But we have like standard, we don't go below. It has to be literary. It has to address like certain devoted readers, not like bestsellers or commercial books. It's the same like Bibi said. And we have difficulties, of course, selling those books in the Arab world these days, because, when you go to book fairs, you see stocks of books like bestsellers and like 1,000 copies. It's like I always have the poorest stand in any given book fair, because I like it to stay neat. nothing on the floor. Like the shelves are very, very few copies. And like I take maximum 50 copies of the book that I would imagine it will sell the whole quantity. Less than this, I don't go above 10 copies of each title. Because, I mean, it's, okay, one of the reasons I'm going to a book fair, of course, to make money, but other reasons is to connect with people, to establish an audience in this country or the other country. So it's like, it's not I'm not that business oriented, which is like, it's no shame to be business oriented, but I mean, I always try to find a happy medium between business and the quality, the content we offer to our readers. And we use social media a lot for like interacting, to engage as many community members as possible all around the world. So when I go to book fairs, I boost my post for the targeted city, and I had I established a lot of customers that way. They come to the stand, they see the books, and they become loyal, and they order our books from different platforms that already existed in the Arab world and now in Europe, which is good. So what else? In terms of bibliodiversity, well, let's talk about this at the end, or we want to establish...
No, that's fine. I mean, we can talk about it, because it will come up in this idea of collaboration and cooperation. So,
Atlas is a member of the International Alliance of Independent Publishers since the year 2009. The Alliance is a collective, professional collective, established in Paris in the year 2000, and it gathers 700 publishers between individuals and collective publishing unions from all over the world, from almost 550 countries. And it's divided into 6 language networks, with English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, and Persian. So I coordinate the Arabic language network. And we are recruiting now, so if you know anybody, any Arab publisher would like to join, just email me, I will send you the application. Okay, the profile of a independent publisher, they are very demanding, these people. I mean, there's no kidding there. And they are very political, very activist. The profile of an independent publisher is the publisher who chooses the title and the catalog on his own, her own, without any pressure from any side, like religious, politic, academic. So I choose my titles, and if somebody would give me money to do this title, that's fine. If not, no, I'll do it myself. So this is one of the main issue with the Alliance, the main mission or goals of the Alliance, to empower the independency of the publishing house, and to empower the independent book, and to give it more visibility. And from this idea comes the concept of bibliodiversity. The bibliodiversity is a concept that was established by Spanish publishers, members in the Alliance. I think in the year, I had a presentation about this. It was in the year 2002. And in the year 2005, when the UNESCO resolution, it's about protection and empowering the diversity of cultural expression, was signed in 2005, it was more possible to put this concept or term, bibliodiversity, in action. So it's about giving all genres of books the same opportunity and the same visibility to be displayed on shelves in good place in a bookstore, not like behind bestsellers or cookbooks or whatever. and encourage readers to go search for this kind of books. So we also raise awareness among our readers to have the civic responsibility of empowering the independent book through this bibliodiversity concept. And the bibliodiversity has its own website, but it's linked with the website of the International Alliance, and it has a magazine, I think trimestrial magazine. The new issue just was published like 3 days ago, I think, and it's about minority languages, threatened languages, and what's our role as publishers in supporting these languages all over the world, of course.
Okay.
And what else I can say? Okay, I don't know. Do I still have time?
No, not much, no. But can I ask a question to fill up the time? So quality of content specifically seems to be a leitmotif that we come on, and this idea of the good reader, right? The ideal reader that you target. But what types of titles are you publishing? What is that content like?
Okay, recently we have been relying a lot of translation grants from different languages, because I mean it gives us some boost, because we cannot like produce as before. We're down to 5 or 6 titles per year in the last 7 years, I would say. So we always look for something that nobody would want to publish. You know what I mean? So it's like,
if you could clarify,
we take risks with like books that are like intellectually demanding sometimes, like highly literate, even in fiction. Like I have this novel. I have 2 books, which is good, so I will show you. This novel is translated from German. It's Lucas Berfus. He's a Swiss. He writes in German, and it's called Haggard. It's a novella. It's not a novel because it's small. So it has like 1 chapter on the span of like the 200 pages, and it just like breathtaking. It's a new technique in writing, and Lucas Berfus is one of the most acclaimed German writers, Swiss German writers.
So experimental.
More or less experimental, and we have this one. It's an art book and designed by the artist himself. It's about, I'll explain, but I need to open it. It's something, he likes to call it the Damascene Cupid, the Damascene. So it's drawing and love stories. So he uses the technique of the monotype. I'm sure artists here know what monotype means. That he draws the drawing 1 time. I mean, he cannot draw it twice. I mean, if he makes mistakes, he should start all over again. And there's like a nice story with it. So it's like a very rare genre in the Arab world. Nobody published something like this before. So this is the kind of books we like to do. And as I was saying, we do lots of translations, because I remember once I went to a German publisher and I was asking to buy the copyrights of a very, very demanding novel, and she was surprised because she asked me, would you have readership for this kind of books in the Middle East? So I was like, oh my God, I felt insulted at first. But I mean, surprisingly, she was right. Because I mean, we maybe have like sold 50 copies only since we printed it. And so it's challenging. But I mean, we sell on a very small scale. Like Bibi said, we want to choose titles that would last, that we would be proud to have them in our catalog in the future. Because now it's a kind of building trust with the audience, because now they look for our publications, they know what we do, and we take very good care with editing, proofreading, no mistakes,
There's this qualitative approach seems
quality, I mean,
over
production and the content at the same time.
Okay, thank you very much. Hichem? Hichem Merouche is a designer and a participant with his wife Maya, of whom we heard a great deal yesterday, of a house called Édition Motifs, which is only young, like a year and a half, 1 year old, based in Algiers.
Yes.
And so the key word that I've retained for Hichem is down leveling. And Ala mentioned this morning the image of the kitchen table, which probably stuck with everyone from yesterday, of Hichem sort of printing and sewing and publishing on his kitchen table, and this sort of kind of homespun, lo-fi distribution as well of putting things in suitcases, which we'll get to later. Mm-hmm. But this kind of kitchen table remained as an image. And so I like the idea of down leveling in the sense that we're not a business, we don't do things commercially, we want to sort of be down there. The money that we make off one book goes to sort of fund the next. So you have a presentation for us, and Fussel as well. I don't know if you're going to cover Fussel, but it's a literary review that you publish, which is the cornerstone of the enterprise.
Good afternoon. I don't know how many people you heard that come to talk about their wives, but don't worry, it's still about
You'd
books.
be surprised, actually.
I'm a graphic designer. Also, I do other stuff related to image making, like movies and photographs. But since 2018, I was very, very interested in, because also of the woman I met that is a publisher since many years. In 2018, I started getting interested in editorial design because books are they were so ugly around me, like, what's happening? And then getting into the field, I understood what's happening, and I'm not close to solve that problem. I live in the city of Algiers. There is no better picture to describe it since 1 year than this one. I also, I come from a graphic design field. I worked for brands, I worked for artists, I worked for spaces. So this is maybe just a glimpse of what I could do. It can be like art festivals, a complete corporate brand. Like this span was completely very, very wide, like throughout maybe 6 years. Something very interesting we did lately, I talked about it yesterday, is like on an exhibition in a certain space in Algiers, like a residency. I got called to make a catalog about this residency that was like 3 years of this space, and they had so many art pieces, and we were looking for to do a catalog. Actually, we came up just with the idea that the catalog is not going to be a book you're going to hold and own and come back home. It's going to be a space you're going to come into, and actually this space, if you have the right eye and you got a spot for things, it's one discussion that starts at a certain point and continues and ends in another point. And we played with typography, like intonation and color it is a discussion between me and the owner of the space. So you go into the catalog, you come out of the catalog, and you visit the exhibition. This is now we come up to 2018 September.
This is the kitchen table.
Where Maya Wabadi started Édition Motifs after working 8 years in the fields of publishing. She's a francophone. She has a master in francophone literature. She worked for Barzakh Edition for 8 years, which is like maybe, let's say, the biggest by number of publications or also by the quality in Algeria. They publish both languages, Arabic and French. And they really, it was the editor house that started in 2000 after the Civil War that really, they accompanied the rising of the contemporary Algerian literature. And I think they are like a landmark in this field. So my wife worked a lot in this publishing house until 2018, where she started her own company, because legally it is a company. And she said, I'm not going to do books anymore, but books in the sense of literature. I'm going to do anything that is around literature to make literature survive, because she was seeing that literature was dying. This picture is a picture of our living room. We have to paint the wall, I agree, but there is a nice sea view. We just have a sea, so we sit there to eat lunch. This was a nice couscous, but we made a mess. This table is also interesting because it is also our working table. Like around one specific publication published by Edition Motifs that is actually started around this critical literature review. That is like, we're gonna talk about books because we don't hear about books coming out. I agree completely, like a lot of things, a lot of books come out and most of them, they are just like tissues to cut humidity in the like stocks or in the under houses. So a big group of young people gathered. I was not working with them. I just joined them like last month to be the designer of their third issue of this magazine. Like let's say like almost 15 people between translators, critiques, correctors of text, both in English and Arabic, drawers, also a graphic designer that is needed. Every 3 months, they have the goal now. They achieve their goals 3 times. I don't know how many times they will achieve it again. To choose a specific topic, gather around it, and they have the freedom to write on whatever they like to read within the topic. They can also be a force of proposition to the next topic. I'm gonna talk lately about this specific thing. This is our main logo that is specifically just a typography. Oh, okay. This is the beautiful woman I met 5 years ago. I like this sentence because I translated, I don't know if it's a good translation. She said it in French, and I think it summarized very well what she wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
This was the 3 edition until now. I think it came out. We had the idea of bringing the first. I mean, they had at the time to the Algiers book fair because it was a chance for us like to sell at least and to show, because Algiers book fair, I think it's one of the most visited book fairs in North Africa. I think it reaches 3 million people through a week. So the first was about the Black Decade into Algerian literature. The second was about autofiction, and the last one was is about Mohammed Deeb, that is today 100 years old. He's dead, of course, but it's like his anniversary, and it is a big thing this year in Algeria. It's because he's like considered the father of Algerian literature. He was writing like from the, let's say, late 40s till he died in 2008. I think he made like 50 books in 50 years. He was writing in French, of course. This publication is both, I didn't think about making the flip, but this publication is actually Arabic and French, and in the middle is divided by a certain thing that can be a drawing or can be like an excerpt of a text to be published. This is the inside of the third edition. There is 3 types of content usually around this main publication of the Motif. There is critical reviews of books. There is interviews with people that works in the editing and publishing field. And sometimes you have like an excerpt of a text that's going to appear. So we go to publishing houses and say like, let's promote a next text you're going to publish like in this month or this week. In this edition, we didn't have the excerpt. We had something else. Mohammed Deeb was not also a subject of interest to critiques. He was also a subject of interest to contemporary artists. And one of the artists who I think he was shown a bit in the UAE, especially in Sharjah, is called Soufiane Zougar. He worked on Mohammed Deeb's very, very specific personage that was adapted into television in Algeria, and he did exactly the same, I don't know if I'm going to explain it well, but he did exactly the same, like the opposite road of what Mohammed did in his book. Because Mohammed Deeb knew a person, a communist from the 50s or the 60s, or maybe the 70s, and he created a fictional character in his book that also this character transferred into television, but he had a certain way of hiding this character, hiding the real one into the invented character. The artist did exactly the opposite. I say I know that it was a real person just because thanks to this artist's work, because we didn't know. So he actually got interested in a character, and he traced his road, and he found out that actually a real person that existed, that he was an Algerian communist, and that his name is Mohamed Batsi, and I don't know if Fas will get rich to UAE, one day you will read about it. And he met his family, he did work about him, and he even like sort of invented archives about him. Like we have no archives. This artist is interested as much into how do you create a new archive, like you trace back your road. This is just a glimpse into the third edition, but thanks to Allah and Maha, we got invited in Beirut to showcase the two editions. Also, they are here. I think you can see them. In 1 year, the publishing house is like 1 year old. We got a bit lucky to reach also like the Mediterranean region because we are also francophone. So we had the chance to go to France and Switzerland to show and talk about this publication and get invited into other places. Something else beside this publication that is taking most of the team's work is also we collaborate with artists to produce artist books, like maybe objects that are like between the boundary of what is a text and what is an object and what is a piece of art. This specific object is like a DVD package, which is completely weird in 2020 to sell DVDs. But we had this idea of challenging what the notion of nostalgia you get with an object. It is about a movie I made about an artist that was residency in Algeria. And the idea here came from the artist herself. Like it's a 3-level point. Like the artist that was that had a movie about her contacted the guy that did the movie to contact the woman that makes the publication. So the idea was from her to say like, how do you want to show your movie? I said like, I'm not going to show my movie. She's like, no, you have to show your movie. She's like, okay, let's think about it. And then she said like, let's play with this DVD idea. And then she said like, but how are we gonna do stuff? Because at Motifs we do everything by hand. Like everything is in this small table. Like you have a printer, you have a cutter, you have like a thread, and you have the needles. And you have this, of course, you have to be careful with the cutter, of course. But because I used it a lot here, you can see exactly how bad I did it in this round circle there. Like it's very, very bad. I see it a lot. I hate it. In this, for example, to collaborate with these artists, we had the idea of not designing a cover, but as she's a painter and the movie is about a painter, let's cut a window, and she did original small paintings that could serve as a cover. So when we would go to exhibition, people would like it because it's like a pattern that is so different. Each one is unique, like stuff. Right now, I think we have like sold maybe, let's say 40. We do also, we don't limit, we don't say we're going to sell 20, we don't sign them. We produce on demand. Everything is produced on demand. The two last edition of like issues of this magazine were like, we print, cut, and sew like mostly 300 to 350. And we'll get to distribution later, but I'm a bit positive right now. This is, we also do commissions sometimes. We are not just a self-generating project people. This is a commission about, it was I think from the Netherlands Embassy in Algiers with the UNESCO program. Stuff we sometimes have difficulties work with because we're not on the same page when it comes to ideology and political. But I mean, it's also a service you can give. And it was a handmade piece-by-piece publication about the regions where there are cultural heritage that is under attack or under a big danger. Just to show you like all the things we do. I don't know what I can say. Also, like in terms of distribution, we do a lot of hand-to-hand. Like we really, as I was saying, like yesterday, like we can. For production and for production, we do the same thing. Like you dress up, you wash your face, you go down, you take a taxi, you go to the city center that is not very far, and you can buy your vegetables for dinner, but you can buy paper and buy thread, and then you come home and you cut it and you have a file that you designed, and then you start produce. So it's producing on demand. One of the major difficulties, it is time taking, but we are doing this, so I don't know what do I give time to as something else to that. One of the main benefits is like if I make a mistake in the third copy, it's not going to be on the fourth copy. If I make a mistake on the fourth copy, it's not going to be on the fifth copy. And the weird thing is that when you have 5 friends that come up to dinner and they have 5 copies, they say like, wait, I don't have this. What's going on? It's like, don't worry, guys. It's normal. It's like Bernard, yesterday we had this discussion about, he said like the margin is a bit close. You got the wrong one actually. The margin is good here. So this is one of the benefits. We are a very, very, very small scale, like a publishing house. We get interest into projects that do not have visibility. We suffer a lot from the fact that we don't have a lot of paper is completely imported in my country. So when you rely on people that import paper and they are not much into art, they tackle big industries. So whether it's like educational books or cuisine books, or so they bring you like, I don't know, they bring you basically 90-gram shiny paper that is completely useless. So we use paper that is like in craft stores, like we buy just a few quantity and we buy in demand. You could ask like Faisal, where do you bring the money to produce? The first time we gave our own money, and we try to make each issue of Faisal magazine finance the next Faisal magazine. But also we don't refuse grants. We were happy for this one to get a French Institute grant that is like very small, but enough to like a bit get a step on.
Okay.
This is what I have to say.
All right, thank you, Hichem. So in the interest of time, I'll just move on quickly to Nasir Abdullah, who's from the UAE. Nasir does many things. He's a curator, he's a researcher. If you're around on Saturday the 15th, he's also curating a show at the NYU Abu Dhabi project space. I'll end the marketing moment really quickly, which is part of the UAE Unlimited. But Nasir is joining us today to talk about a magazine which existed for a very long time, in which he, in 2015, up-leveled. So this is if Hichem is about down-leveling, Nasir is all about up-leveling. So he took a magazine that was attached to the Emirates Fine Arts Society. And I'm very cautious about using superlatives in the UAE, but I guess it's safe to say that the Emirates Fine Arts Society is probably the oldest arts institution that we've got. Or it's certainly one of the oldest, if I want to qualify it, prudently. But so Tashkeel existed as part of that, and in 2015, Sharjah Art Foundation sort of generously entrusted you to up-level it and change it, and it had a run of a startling number of years. And just tell us a little bit about that journey with Tashkeel.
Okay, thank you again for Warehouse 421 for having us all together in this place. We are actually not a publishing house, it's a fine art society. It's a non-profit organization that gather all artists in one place, like a big umbrella for all practices of art in general. And additional to that, we have photographers and calligraphy practitioners in our society. Just to give you a background of the society, we'll start this presentation quickly, it will not be that long. But starting from 1971, when this country was formed, actually, there was a very famous quote from His Highness Sheikh Zayed, God bless him, the founder of this country, which he said, "Bina al-insan aham min jam' al-tharawat," which I will be translating to, human being is more important than gathering fortune, and he's referring to oil at that time. And this was literally translated into hundreds of people traveling around the world to get their higher degrees, or actually to get their degrees in different fields, including a big number of people who went abroad to study art. And they end up in many countries, including neighborhoods like Kuwait, Iraq, Egypt, who had a very advanced practice of art at that time comparing to what we have in the country, and in the very early stage of the forming the country in 1971, and United Kingdom and some others went to different locations also. having those artists coming back to the country and forming the Fine Art Society was a very common practice to start a professional kind of non-profit organization called societies at that time. And Emirates Fine Art Society was one of the first societies in the country. It's listed as number 4, while we have right now more than 150 societies in the country. Each one is specifically dominated for a specific type of practice in terms of literature, art, professions like engineers. We have accountants societies, but this one is for Emirates Fine Art Society. And it was very clear in that stage that art scholarship was not continuing after that stage of many people going to study abroad. And it recently came back with the project of SIF, and thank you to Sheikh Salama Foundation, who is supporting a new bunch of artists that have been getting their higher degrees in fine art going all from UAE. But at that time, the form of transferring knowledge of art was going by from a generation to another one. Mainly, we will focus on maybe the late Hassan Sharif. He had the major practice of educating people, educating new generations about his own practice and his own, or even about the art in general. So one of the things that they initiated, like the society was founded in 1980. Again, it was one of the very first institutions related to fine art. But in 1984, specifically in September 1984, they issued the first issue of Tashkeel magazine. By the way, I was born in September 84.
Wow.
So it's as old as I am. It was one of the tools that this country or the artists coming from abroad used to educate younger and other generations. So it was a very early practice of translating few articles, reviewing few books, even talking about different issues in the region and in the country. Different stages that the magazine went through. It meant to be quarterly, but sometimes we have one issue along the year, sometimes one issue in 5 years, and it goes on in different stages. So to have something about Johannes Itten, Kazimir Malevich, Marcel Duchamp in 1984 or 1985 in this country was something big. Was something really enlightening, was something really educating people about what is going on around the world. At the same time, you will find something like some specific studies like Lawha wal-Mushahada, which is about painting in the region, or cinema and fine art, which was another topic that people were studying and trying to compare and understand in this region. So it was creating that kind of balance between following what was going on outside the region, outside the country, and at the same time focusing on very specific issues that was going along the side in the country. In 2015, thank you to Sharjah Art Foundation, they supported the magazine to come back, and at that time I used to be the chairman of Emirates Fine Art Society. I realized how important it was to have back the Tashkeel magazine, and not just Tashkeel magazine. We also had the pleasure of publishing a couple of books. One of them was about Hassan Sharif, the late artist, and another one was in cooperation with Al Bayan newspaper that was about the founders of the society by interviewing them and documenting some of their early practices. So at Tashkeel magazine in this stage had a different approach. It has a different way that we will be looking at it. It's not a source of knowledge anymore. At that time, we had the barrier of language, a minimum amount of sources about fine art in the country, but this is not the issue anymore. So even the goals and the content of the magazine changed along the time, although we are still doing something about the region, the artists in the field, about sculpture, about different issues, different debates and negotiations that were still going on along the side with the art movement in the country, but we also do very specific academically kind of reviews and studies that still go in the magazine, and it is really into it goes to a very specific audience that are really interested in the field. We also issued something about the establishment of the warehouse 421, which was one of the things that we did at Tashkeel magazine in the new version, that we cooperate with other organizations, do a bit of coverage here and there, exchange spaces between having an article about a specific event in our magazine, and then we will have the chance to be on a booth in one of the fairs, for example, or something like that. So even the challenges or the goals and what we have and Tashkeel magazine have been changed along the side and along the time. And that's where I will end up with 3-4 points that I noticed while I was working on the magazine, and I think it is important to raise here. At Tashkeel magazine, from the early beginning, it was based on very personal efforts. So artists used to work on the content for artists. And this is a major thing that we also need to consider. We are the professional of the field. We need to create the content, the proper content, to develop our field, to develop our practice as artists, as whatever, just name it. We still have to do it by ourselves. It's a big challenge. It will need support along the time, but at the end of the day, we have to do it ourselves. And the changes of goals and content through time was another big issue that, with personal efforts, that's so difficult to do. And that's with the previous example of Majalat Majid or Majid magazine. It's an institution, it's a big organization that had the chance to do studies, to do surveys, to have the privilege of talking to people, which is not always the case with smaller entities, non-profit organizations. But those are challenges that we also have to face and we have to take in consideration and working on and developing along the time. Distribution, we all face the same issue among the distribution. We tried our best to reach as much as possible of organizations, galleries, interested people around the country. Again, it's not an easy method of doing it. Using a distribution company was a really difficult method of dealing with that organization. The database is very minimum in terms of who to reach by sending these magazines and where they end up. So we approached all the universities, but going and visiting universities, you don't see the magazine in the library. It's not there. I don't know exactly where it ends up, but somehow it doesn't end up in the library. So this is something that we also face about distribution. Selling. Well, actually, we tried our best to sell the magazine. We are a magazine at the end of the day. It's not like a very specific book that we're trying to approach specific people. It's a magazine. So I took the chance to spend some money to put the magazine on a couple of shelves in the country. It didn't work. And going back to the distributor, what was the issue? Why it didn't sell? And that was so funny to realize that because it doesn't have any advertisement. So the thing that people will run away from and what they will skip through magazines, actually they will not focus on, is the main reason that people will buy magazines. And I did a bit of search about this, and what I found was so surprising for me, that with no advertisement, people will think this is a very serious kind of publication that they will not be approaching and they will not waste money for buying. While having a bit of advertisement, it will have a sense of entertainment a little bit. Easygoing reading, few lines, you can skip pages. You will not feel bad that I skipped this page, I didn't read this article, by having advertisement. So it was so funny to realize this, but we kept doing our process, not adding advertisement in the magazine, but we had at the end of the day to stop it because we couldn't fund it anymore. it was a bit of a challenge to keep depending on outsource or a specific organization or even in the government to support something that keep raising in cost, that keep raising in challenges of distributing, of not being able to sell it, and putting in mind that being in the society as chairman or member of board, it's a voluntary job. It's not something I get paid for. I have my own full-time job that starts 9, ends at 5, and then after that I have to go back to the society to start my practice of focusing and then start working on any issues, any topics, any exhibitions, any other things that are going on. Again, we are not a publishing house. It was not just the magazine. It was many other things also going on. So this is what the Tashkeel magazine was going through.
Wow.
It's perfect. It's frightening to think that everyone needs a Balenciaga ad somehow in their publication, which is the world is really a very dark place. I'm going to relinquish my rights to ask questions to these guys in the interest of time and open it up to the audience. And if the audience is too shy, I'll ask my questions. So can we have some questions from the audience, the non-shy audience members?
Not shy audience? I think that.
Wafa. There's a mic coming to you, I think. And there's a quick mic.
Great, thank you. So why didn't you just opt to put advertisements in the magazine to allow it to continue and so that you wouldn't have to close down?
Okay. Actually, if you are approaching advertisement, it's another market to focus on. People who approach any magazine for advertisement are way away from fine art, from culture, from our topic. It's always someone who has nothing to do with the field. So it's a bit challenge to put them alongside with a very good article that we spend time on, that we commission an writer to approach and to work on a specific topic, and then put it next to a painting advertisement or a car or even a luxury product. The second point was that we don't print as much as enough copies that advertiser will to be interested in to be in. And again, the issue of distribution, also another topic that it's a really complicated system to think about it, and it will not be easy to put it in one line.
Yeah.
And even locally, anyone in that field who would advertising it, like the galleries, for example, wouldn't. They don't have the budgets to even if it's in the name of support, they generally club advertising together.
Well, in cultural organization, it's really a luxury to advertise.
But it's funny your point that people don't take a magazine. They think it's too serious, so they read it because there's no glossy advertising. I think that's the most disturbing thing I've heard in a long time. Someone else? Yes.
Hi, Bibi, I had a question for you. Out of all your catalog, what's a good recommendation for a book that you print that would help understand Nigerian culture? Do you have a favorite? I know I'm asking you to pick one of your children, but...
Good.
I don't think there's any that would explain Nigerian culture, because Nigeria is a country of over 150 ethnic groups. But I would suggest one book which explains a particular historical moment, the 80s to now, is a book called A Small Silence by Juniper. And I will also recommend a book by Emmanuel Eduma, which is a travelogue across Nigeria and different African spaces. And it's a mixture of, he's an art curator, so he writes as an artist, but also a photographer. So the book is a mixture of text and photography.
That's nice.
Bernard has a question.
I have a question about Algeria. You you talked about your business, but you didn't mention what's going on in Algeria in general. So in terms of self-publishing, do you meet with others who are publishing in the same? Is there a network? Are there, is there a bigger structure in which people actually publishing and trying to publish?
I think it's like a starting network and a growing network, but we could be accused of people that stay just close in the capital because we inherited something from the political side and from the decision making, that it was a country founded on very, very centralized initiatives, be it governmental, all the resources are there, all the things are there. But I'm more interested in,
do you know personally other people who publish?
Yeah, I'm going to get there. Actually, I personally know, like, I can count it in my hand, like the people I know that self-publish. I know that there are people also, they do it, but they do it like by themselves. I know like people who do drawings and caricature. I know people who write short poetry, but it's like, how to say, like 4 papers that are folded together, not even sewed. But I don't think it's like taking, we didn't see, we want to. We're reaching out to these people. People are taking initiatives in this thing, even opening library. I know a person that is 21 years old that opened a library, and she wanted to she wanted it to be focused on something else that she wanted to see. For example, artist books, bags, anything you could do in craft and stuff like that. I can talk just like on the side of the capital because it's like 2 million kilometer square country. So, and we are all like stuck in the beaches. But yeah, also it's a problem to get our publications out. But we're looking so forward to do this. Like we're trying to reach out to people, to organize events, to invite people to tell, hey, we are here also. Because this was our case 3 years ago. We were like wondering, are there people that do this stuff? So maybe now there are other people that do this stuff. So we're looking forward.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Susie, has a question.
Thank you. This question would be maybe for Nasir, and maybe Kevin, you can have an idea on it. Do you feel that Tashkeel at the time filled a need to, like, for just proper art content that people could understand, or maybe it was more for catered just towards artists? I'm just asking, like with Canvas and Harper's Bazaar Art Arabia, like these are things that I guess maybe like the opening of Warehouse, they would feature something talking about it. Do you feel that they would have to re-strategize what need Tashkeel would be now that there's so many different outlets for coverage of?
Well, for us, it was a different kind of publication. It was not a very magazine thing. It was more of a journal plus a magazine. And that's what we always see important to focus on, important to raise all the time. More academic type of content is always needed, no matter if it was in a magazine or a book or even in Canvas or Harper's Bazaar or whatever publication. That was our tension, but we couldn't do it all along the side. We had to cooperate with other organizations to make it work easier for us. So I'm not sure if you want to add anything on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of factors that contribute to the change. I mean, I think it went from being a tool. I mean, you had the legacy of that knowledge transfer, right? Like, so you came to it with the idea that this is still going to perform that role of informing people. So you didn't, I mean, again, how did you position it? It's like half magazine, half journal. And at the time there was also, it may still exist, but it's just not distributed well, is a magazine called Contemporary Practices. If you remember that, which was, again, really journal. Like, and they had like no advertising, like, this is like October. There are barely images in it as well, right? So I think that was really hardcore journal. The magazine's canvas at the time, again, I think 2015, which isn't that long ago, but it was, I mean, I might make enemies with this, but it was like largely a society magazine. You had coverage of people going to openings and you know, collectors and things. It was, that was its focus. And I'm not saying that in any judgmental way, but that was the focus. That was what it did. It talked about openings, collectors, patronage. This was its field. So between that, you kind of Tashkeel sat in a nice sort of white, in a white space that nobody occupied. But I guess the readership wasn't getting it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel that there was a way of maybe positioning it differently. I don't know, because it's true. You know, things about ethics and stuff were. For me, it was a magazine that was really interesting. And I used to get again. One of the questions I wanted to ask was outreach to writers. Like, how does everyone find writers? Which came up yesterday, but I think it's certainly not spoken about enough. But like, I used to get you know, emails from Tashkeel to contribute all the time. So there was a real, you know, hardcore push to get contributors on board to write for it. So I don't know. I mean, I think that it didn't position itself correctly and all that. And the readership, with the growth of Canvas and with the growth of Harper's Bazaar Art, even Harper's Bazaar Art at the time, you know, there were two editors who were there who really treated it like kind of an art magazine, right? It had a kind of critical, I don't want to say sting, but it had a critical edge to it. Those things kind of come and go, like, and I think it just didn't occupy the space firmly enough, maybe.
In terms of positioning, well, in 1980, when the society was formed, it was the only organization focused on art. And by now, we are talking about tens of organizations that are taking care about fine art specifically, and maybe hundreds, if not more, about culture in general. So positioning ourselves was a bit of issue within generations that went through the society. And of course, Tashkeel was one of the issues that went through the same procedure also.
Yeah, and like many things in the UAE, it's linked to a person.
Yeah.
A person drives it, right? Like, as soon as that person stops driving it, it goes away. I mean, think of all these institutions that we have are driven by the people that put their personal efforts, as you had on your slide. Yeah. They're the ones who drive it. And when that person sort of decides, well, I'm not going to do this, or it goes away, then things kind of vanish or disintegrate.
Can I say something in this regard? Because in Syria, we still have like 4 major magazines, or الحياة الموسيقية, الحياة التشكيلية, الحياة المسرحية. I think الآداب الأجنبية, 4 magazines. I mean, it's like, I don't know how they are still publishing them. This is the Ministry of Culture. And of course, they downsized the print run tremendously in the last years. But they are still coming out, and they are like very highly literary articles written by, I mean, specialized people, and sometimes translations of articles written in other languages. And I supply universities in the West, like in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, and in Beirut for the German Institute for Eastern Study. So, I mean, this is, I mean, it's like, it's sad to hear that you had to stop because there's no distribution. You could have like downsized, I mean, I don't know, find the solution for it. Well, I'm sorry, but I mean,
I know. It's not that easy to say it in this way.
I know, but I mean, it struck me that these people, I mean, a destroyed country are still, I mean, issuing 4 magazines, like they're not small, they're like 200 pages each.
Well, even the system of non-profit organizations in different countries in the Arab world, like we mentioned yesterday, it's not the Middle East, it's more than 22 countries. So realizing that something like the society in Syria, for example, it's called Naqaba, which is a different system than
It was Zara, I mean, mainly,
Jam'iyya is more of our society,
so
is more of a charity.
It's the government, it's the government,
Although we are independent in terms of management, in terms of system, but it's again what Kevin just mentioned. Changing the people along the side, the way that we run the society, it happened by elections. So someone will raise his hand to be the chairman of the society, and taking that position, give him the responsibility of doing things, but someone would be so excited about certain project, other people would be excited about other projects. So different changes of people are going on all the time. And there is no, this is another issue of running societies, actually. The system that keeps changing all the time. It's not a private entity that I will run it in my own way all the time.
Yeah.
It's
true.
Different systems, different people, different issues.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we've gone so far over time, there's no lunch, right? Lunch is canceled. No, all right, that's good.
There is lunch, and then we come back here at 3. So there's a performance starting here at 3 sharp. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.